Welcome to Iraqi Dinar News, where you receive real and authentic updates about the Iraqi dinar. If you want to stay informed with moment-by-moment developments, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Today's discussion is based on a statement that reflects optimism among Iraqi dinar investors, suggesting that holders of the currency should feel encouraged and positive with expectations of potential movement and change in the near future. Now, while that sentiment is clearly upbeat, it's important to step back and analyze what this kind of statement means from a financial and economic perspective, especially if you are following the Iraqi dinar closely. Let's start by addressing the tone of the statement itself. Expressions like very encouraged, very positive, and expectations of major movement often emerge in periods where investors are anticipating change, but they don't necessarily confirm that change is imminent or guaranteed. In financial markets, optimism can sometimes be driven by underlying fundamentals, but it can also reflect speculation, sentiment, or even misinterpretation of broader economic developments. So the key question becomes, is there a factual basis supporting this optimism when it comes to Iraq's economy and its currency? To answer that, we need to look at Iraq's current economic framework. Iraq remains heavily dependent on oil revenues, which account for the majority of government income and foreign currency inflows. This means that any discussion about the strength or potential appreciation of the Iraqi dinar must start with global oil prices and production levels. When oil prices are stable or rising, Iraq benefits from stronger fiscal revenues, which can improve its ability to maintain currency stability. However, that doesn't automatically translate into a significant revaluation or sudden major movement in the exchange rate. Another important factor is the role of the Central Bank of Iraq. The central bank operates a managed exchange rate system where it actively intervenes in the foreign exchange market to maintain relative stability of the dinar against the US dollar. Over the past several years, the bank has focused on controlling inflation, stabilizing the currency, and maintaining confidence in the financial system. These are long-term policy goals, and they typically do not involve abrupt or dramatic changes in the currency's value. So when investors hear statements suggesting that major movement is coming soon, it's important to interpret that carefully. In most cases, central banks prefer gradual adjustments rather than sudden shifts, especially in economies like Iraq, where stability is a priority. A sharp appreciation in the currency could actually create economic challenges, including reduced competitiveness of exports and disruptions to domestic markets. Now let's consider what could realistically be behind the optimism expressed in the statement. There are a few possible explanations. First, Iraq has been working on financial and economic reforms aimed at improving transparency, strengthening the banking sector, and reducing corruption. These reforms are important because they build long-term confidence in the economy. If investors are reacting to progress in these areas, then the optimism has some foundation, but it should still be viewed as a gradual process rather than an immediate catalyst for major currency changes. Second, Iraq has been engaging with international financial institutions and partners to stabilize its economy. This includes efforts to modernize its financial infrastructure, improve compliance with international banking standards, and enhance its ability to participate in global trade. Again, these are positive developments, but they contribute to long-term stability rather than short-term dramatic shifts. Third, there may be expectations tied to political developments within Iraq. Political stability plays a crucial role in economic performance. If there are signs of improved governance, reduced internal conflict, or more effective policy making, that can boost investor confidence. However, political progress in Iraq has historically been uneven, and it's not something that typically results in immediate changes to currency valuation. For Iraqi Dinar followers, the key takeaway here is that optimism should always be balanced with realistic expectations. The idea of major movement in the near future might sound appealing, but in the context of how currencies actually behave, especially in emerging or developing economies, it's important to remain grounded in economic fundamentals. Let's break this down further into short-term and long-term implications. In the short term, the Iraqi dinar is likely to remain relatively stable, with minor fluctuations influenced by oil revenues, government spending, and central bank interventions. The Central Bank of Iraq has shown a clear commitment to maintaining exchange rate stability, and there is little indication that it intends to allow sudden or extreme changes. So while there may be incremental adjustments or policy tweaks, a dramatic shift in value over a very short period is unlikely under normal circumstances. That said, short-term movement could still occur in other ways. For example, changes in exchange rate policy, adjustments to currency auctions, or shifts in banking regulations can create the perception of movement without fundamentally altering the value of the dinar. These are the kinds of developments that investors should pay attention to rather than relying solely on broad statements of optimism. In the long term, the outlook for the Iraqi dinar depends on structural factors. Economic diversification is one of the most important. Iraq has long relied on oil, but efforts to develop other sectors, such as agriculture, manufacturing, and services, could strengthen the economy and reduce vulnerability to oil price volatility. A more diversified economy generally supports a more stable and potentially stronger currency over time. Another long-term factor is fiscal discipline. Government spending, budget deficits, and debt levels all play a role in currency stability. If Iraq can maintain responsible fiscal policies and avoid excessive reliance on borrowing, that will contribute to a healthier economic environment and potentially improve confidence in the dinar. Banking sector reform is also critical. A strong, transparent, and well-regulated banking system attracts investment and facilitates economic growth. Iraq has made some progress in this area, but there is still work to be done. Continued improvements could gradually enhance the credibility of the financial system and support the currency in the long run. It's also worth mentioning the role of external factors. Global economic conditions, geopolitical developments, and regional stability all influence Iraq's economy. For example, fluctuations in global oil demand, changes in international trade policies, or tensions in the Middle East can all impact Iraq's economic outlook and, by extension, its currency. Now, let's address an important point for viewers who may be holding Iraqi dinar as an investment. Statements that encourage strong optimism should always be evaluated critically. It's natural to feel positive about an investment, but it's equally important to base decisions on verified information and realistic expectations. Currency markets are complex, and they are influenced by a wide range of factors that do not always align with individual expectations. One common misconception is that currencies can experience sudden, massive increases in value without corresponding economic changes. In reality, significant currency appreciation typically requires substantial improvements in economic productivity, trade balance, and overall financial stability. These are not overnight developments. They occur over years, not days or weeks. So when you hear phrases like major movement or big changes coming soon, it's helpful to ask, what specific economic indicators support this view? Are there concrete policy changes, measurable improvements in economic performance, or official announcements from credible institutions? If not, then the statement should be treated as sentiment rather than a reliable forecast. At the same time, it's important not to dismiss optimism entirely. Positive sentiment can reflect genuine progress, and Iraq has indeed taken steps toward economic stabilization in recent years. The challenge is to separate realistic optimism from exaggerated expectations. For Iraqi dinar followers, a balanced approach is the most effective strategy. Stay informed about economic data, follow official announcements from the Central Bank of Iraq and government institutions, and pay attention to credible financial analysis. Avoid relying solely on unverified claims or overly optimistic narratives. As we move forward, the most likely scenario is one of gradual progress rather than sudden transformation. Iraq's economy has potential, but it also faces challenges that require time and consistent policy efforts to address. The dinar's value will ultimately reflect the strength of the underlying economy, and that is something that evolves over the long term. In conclusion, while the statement we discussed today expresses strong confidence and positivity, it should be viewed as a reflection of investor sentiment, rather than a confirmed indicator of immediate change. The Iraqi dinar remains tied to broader economic fundamentals, including oil revenues, fiscal policy, and central bank management. Short-term stability is the most probable outcome, while long-term improvements depend on continued reforms and economic diversification. If you are following the Iraqi dinar, focus on facts, stay informed, and maintain realistic expectations. Optimism can be valuable, but it should always be grounded in evidence and careful analysis. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe to the channel for responsible and factual Iraqi dinar updates. And remember that this content is for informational purposes only and not financial advice.